My name is Talia Monroe. I'm 32 years old. If you looked at my life from the outside before the accident, you'd have seen a woman who had it together. Good job, decent apartment, a boyfriend people liked on paper, and a family that never stopped talking in the group chat. What you wouldn't see was the part where I paid for everything. After a car wreck left me bruised and alone, I sent, "Please help." Silence. Hours later, my brother tagged everyone in a post. The family's complete. Not a word about me. 4 days later, still limping, my phone showed 53 missed calls and a Venmo request. $4,600. Cabin weekend. Then Dad texted, "We can't fix this without you." I sent 50 cents with the note. I remember the crunch of metal more than the pain. That and the sound of my own voice calling out in a panic as my car spun across the ice-licked road. It was early February, right after one of those surprise Midwest snowfalls that everyone underestimates. The city hadn't salted the back roads yet, and I was driving home after picking up meds for my mom. Meds she hadn't even asked for, but I remembered she needed. The irony still pisses me off. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't distracted. The car just lost control. The back wheel slid out. I tapped the brakes, and next thing I knew, I was sideways. The front bumper hit a utility pole. Airbags exploded. My head snapped hard against the window. Everything went white. My ears rang, then silence. I sat there with blood in my mouth and glass in my jacket, barely able to move my leg. The pain hadn't even fully hit yet, but I knew something was wrong. An older couple saw it happen and called 911. I remember trying to smile when they asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I lied. "My name is Talia." That was all I could manage. At the hospital, they ran scans. Torn ligament in my left leg, bad bruising along my ribs, a mild concussion. The doctor said I was lucky, which was funny because lying there alone in a hallway with a torn-up body and nobody to call felt like the exact opposite of lucky. I didn't call my parents right away, or my siblings, or even my boyfriend Noah. I figured someone would check in eventually. We had a group chat that always buzzed nonstop. Someone's dog doing something stupid. Memes. Last-minute plans that always somehow involved me footing the bill. So I just sent one message. "Please help." No context. I figured that would be enough to get someone's attention. Just 2 words. Because when someone like me says that, the woman who always has it together, who shows up, who handles everything, you'd think people would notice. They didn't. Not even a question mark. No text, no call, nothing. I checked Noah's name in my messages once, my finger hovering over it. We'd been together 2 years. He'd seen me burn myself out keeping everyone afloat. He'd joked about me being the CFO of the family, like it was some cute quirk. His ex-girlfriend, Grace, once warned me in a half-joking way at a party. "Careful, he's used to other people taking the hit so he doesn't have to." I laughed it off at the time. Lying there under fluorescent lights, I didn't feel like calling anyone. I wanted them to notice on their own. 4 hours later, as I sat in a wheelchair in the hospital lobby waiting for the cab I had to order myself, I got the notification. My brother had posted a group photo on Instagram. The family. My parents, my sister, him, even his new girlfriend, who I'd met once, all standing in front of a fireplace with wine glasses in hand, tagged at a cabin 3 hours north. The caption, "The family's complete." I read it 3 times. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I stared at that photo, still in my hospital gown, ice pack on my knee, trying to decide if I was dreaming. I scrolled through the comments. Laughing emojis. Heart eyes. Someone from church commented, "Beautiful family." My mom replied with a heart. No one messaged me. That night, I got home alone in a cab and crawled up the stairs to my second-floor apartment. I had to sit on each step and scoot. Every movement sent a sharp ache slicing up my leg and into my ribs. I hadn't eaten since the night before. There was no food in the fridge. No one offered to drop by. No one asked how I was. I opened my messages, expecting at least one from Noah. There was one text from earlier that day, before the accident. "Hey, babe, my parents are asking if we're still coming up next month. They love how generous you are. Said not everyone would help out like you do." I stared at it, feeling sick. I could almost hear his voice, light and casual, as if my generosity was a personality trait he could show off. I typed back, "Got in an accident. Home now. I'm okay. Just sore." I watched the typing bubbles appear, then vanish. Then nothing. 4 days passed. I didn't text my family again. I didn't say a word in the group chat. I lay in bed, icing my leg, heating up cans of soup, trying to think of what I did wrong. Why, please help, wasn't enough. Why my boyfriend thought I'm okay, just sore, meant he could go back to whatever he was doing and not bother asking if I needed anything. On the fourth day, I opened my phone. I wasn't sure what I expected. 53 missed calls. All from them. And a Venmo request from my sister. 46er and cabin weekend. Like nothing had happened. Like it was just business as usual. I was always the one who paid. You're doing so well, Talia, they'd say, like that justified dumping their expenses on me. I'd always made sure they had what they needed, even when they were reckless, even when it meant I had to skip things I wanted for myself. Noah's name popped up again. Hey, your sister texted me about the cabin. They're freaking out about money. Think you can clear it up? I know you're mad, but it's family. It wasn't concern, it was damage control. Then, right under the Venmo request, a message from Dad. We can't fix this without you. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in anger, in clarity. I opened Venmo, typed in 50 cents, and wrote, "Consider this your down payment for karma." Hit send. I leaned back and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because something had finally clicked. They didn't ignore me by accident. They just didn't care. And if they didn't care, I owed them nothing. They'd forgotten who kept the lights on. Now it was my turn to remind them. The funny thing about drawing a line is that, at first, nothing happens. After I sent the 50 cents with that little note about karma, I expected an explosion, a barrage of texts, a phone call from my dad with that sharp edge in his voice he used when bills were due or when I didn't answer fast enough about money. Instead, there was nothing, just this weird, eerie silence. I checked the family group chat. It was still active, just without me. They were planning some wine tasting thing for the weekend after the cabin trip. Pairings, outfits, which cousin could get a discount. My name didn't come up once. It was like I'd been cut out of the picture entirely, not even blocked, just ignored. It was almost impressive in a way. Then on Friday, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. Then another one. I stared at the screen, my leg throbbing as I shifted on the couch. When it buzzed again, this time it was a text from my sister, short and panicked. "You serious about cutting us off? No, how are you? No, are you okay after the accident?" Just that. I didn't answer. Not that day. Not the next either. I just sat back and watched as the panic slowly built. The missed calls turned into voicemails. I didn't listen to them. Then came the texts, not just from my siblings, but from my mom's number, then Dad's, and eventually a few cousins I hadn't heard from in months. They all had the same tone, confused, then annoyed, then borderline desperate. At some point, a notification flashed from Noah. "Your sister says you're not responding. What's going on, Tal? Maybe just talk to them? It's not that deep." Not that deep. I stared at those words until they blurred. I typed, then deleted. Not that deep? I was in a car wreck and they left me bleeding in a hospital lobby. I erased it and put the phone face down. By the end of the week, my brother sent an email, an actual spreadsheet attached. I opened it out of morbid curiosity. It was titled, "Family Obligations, Talia." Each row was itemized by date. Flights he had booked on my behalf. Vacation deposits, weekend rentals. A line that read, "Dad's birthday gift from all of us. Talia handles payment." No, how are you feeling? No, do you need anything? Just a total at the bottom. 7,000 expected from me. My chest went tight. I'd always joked that I was the family's bank, that they should print little debit cards with my face on them. Suddenly, it didn't feel funny anymore. It felt like a confession they'd written down in Excel. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the familiar autopay icons. First, my sister's student loans. She had no idea I'd been covering the interest every month. She just sent screenshots of how stressful debt is, and I quietly made sure the late fees never hit. Cancel. Then the joint account I'd opened with my brother 3 years ago, the one he used as a backup when he overdrafted his own checking. We'd called it Rainy Day, but it was always raining for him and never for me. There was $312 in there. Transfer to my account. Close account. My hand shook a little as I hit confirm. I wasn't used to choosing myself, not in numbers that big. I paused at my parents' utility account. I'd been covering their electric and gas bills since last winter. They never asked. I just offered, back when I thought they were tired and struggling and doing their best. Back when I thought love meant making sure they never felt discomfort. I thought about my dad's text. "We can't fix this without you." Fix what? Their lifestyle? Their habits? The system where everyone leaned on me so hard I forgot what standing on my own felt like? Cancel autopay. Click. Done. A few minutes later, Noah called. Hey, he said, voice soft in that way he used when he wanted something to feel reasonable. Your brother just texted me. He says you're pulling accounts. Is that true? Yeah, I said, it is. Silence hummed on the line for a second. I mean, I get that you're mad, he said slowly, but cutting off the utilities? That's a lot. They're your parents, Talia. They're my parents who left me alone after a car crash, I said, and then sent me a bill. He sighed. Grace used to say I was too forgiving with my family, he muttered, almost to himself. Maybe she had a point. Grace, the ex-girlfriend who'd warned me, with that half-smile, half-winced expression. He doesn't always see where the line should be, she'd said. You might have to draw it for him, and for everyone else. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. Now it felt like a prophecy I'd ignored. I'm not asking you to pick sides, I said. Just don't ask me to keep bleeding for people who don't even send a text when I say I need help. I'm not picking sides, Noah said quickly, but his tone was tight. I'm just saying, this is going to blow up. Maybe you could have a conversation instead of hitting them financially like this. Funny, I said quietly. The only language they seem to understand is money. He didn't have an answer for that. We hung up with no resolution, just this heavy feeling between us, like a crack that hadn't split all the way through yet, but would. Saturday came. I was still limping, but I managed to drive myself to physical therapy in a rental car with a seat that didn't quite adjust right. The therapist asked if anyone would be helping me at home. No, I said. Her forehead creased. No family nearby? They're nearby, I said, just not available. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it. She adjusted my brace instead. That night, I opened the family group chat again. I hadn't said a word since Please Help. My brother had renamed the group Family Corp. Fitting. The only ones left in it were him, my sister, my parents, and a cousin who still owed me $900. They were arguing about budgets now, about canceling trips, about unexpected financial strain. Then the kicker. A new Venmo request. This time from my dad. £1,000 emergency dental for your mother. No message, no explanation. Just the assumption that I'd come through like always. The same way I'd come through when the furnace broke, when the taxes were late, when my brother's truck needed repairs, when my sister's lease deposit bounced. I didn't send money. Instead, I sent another 50 cents with a note. Let her smile reflect her decisions. Petty? Maybe. Honest? Definitely. That night, my uncle called me. Not for money, just called. Hey kid, he said, his voice rough and warm. I heard through someone that you'd been in an accident. You okay? I told him the truth. Every detail. The spin of the car, the hospital, the silence, the cabin photo, the Venmo requests. He listened without interrupting. No dramatic gasps, no forced sympathy. When I was done, he let out a low breath. About time you let them stand on their own, he said. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear that until my eyes burned. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy. 2 days later, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Grandma. Inside was a $20 bill and a note in shaky pen strokes. For groceries or something just for you. Proud of you. That was it. No lecture, no guilt, just love that asked for nothing in return. I sat on my couch, card in one hand, crumpled envelope in the other, and cried for the first time since the accident. Not because of the money. Because someone finally saw me. Not as a wallet, not as a fixer, not as a walking safety net, but as a granddaughter who had been hurt and was trying to stand up again. And for the first time, the cost of saying no didn't feel like a loss. It felt like the first honest step toward getting my life back. The text came on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning where my leg felt stiff in the cold and every movement tugged at the torn ligament, just enough to remind me I wasn't fully healed. I was sipping weak coffee, scrolling through job emails I'd ignored during recovery, when my phone buzzed. It was a message in Family Corp. Dad, everyone come to the hospital Friday, we need to talk. That was it. No greeting, no explanation, no. How is your leg healing, Talia? Just an order. A minute later, a private message popped up. Dad again. We can't fix this without you. I stared at the words long enough for the screen to dim. Fix what? Their finances? Their guilt? Their image of being a perfect close family? Not once had they asked if I could physically get to the hospital. I sent back a thumbs up. Not sarcasm, just done. Noah called that night. His voice had that familiar, too careful softness, the same tone he used when he was trying to keep things smooth between me and his parents. "I heard your family wants a meeting," he said. "Maybe this is good, Tal. Maybe they want to apologize. Or maybe they want their funding back." He paused a second too long. "That's not fair." "It's fair," I said. "It's just uncomfortable." He sighed. "Look, I talked to my mom about this. She said sometimes families get overwhelmed and—" "I'm not interested in your mom's take," I said, sharper than I intended. He exhaled loudly. "Grace used to say you overthink things, you know." There it was, the ex-girlfriend's name again. "Did she?" "Yeah, she said you take everything like a personal attack." I let that sink in. Grace, the woman who once warned me privately at a party about Noah's tendency to see people as roles, not humans. The same Grace who walked away from him because she felt used. Maybe she'd been talking about him, not me. "I'll talk to you later," I said and hung up. Something in me had shifted, and I wasn't sure Noah fit into the new version of my life. Friday came. I didn't dress for battle. Just a hoodie, jeans, and the brace around my leg. I limped into the hospital, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the air cold with disinfectant and something metallic. Second floor, physical therapy wing. When the elevator doors slid open, they were already there. Mom was sitting rigid in a corner chair, arms crossed tight like she was bracing for an argument she'd rehearsed 100 times. Dad stood near the window, pretending to look outside, but shifting on his feet like a man waiting for a verdict. My sister sat with her legs tucked under her, eyes glued to her phone. My brother paced, glancing up every time the elevator dinged. They looked worse than I remembered. Tired, uneasy, but mostly unfamiliar. I walked past the empty chairs and leaned against the wall. No one greeted me. They waited for me to speak first. I didn't. Dad cleared his throat. "You got our messages." I nodded. Mom jumped in fast, voice tight. "We need to talk as a family. Things got out of hand." I let out a slow breath. "Yeah," I said. "They did." My sister looked up, half defensive, half irritated. "Is this about money? Because you've been weird about it." That snapped something inside me. Not anger. Truth. I pushed off the wall and took one step toward them, just enough to make all of them look up. "I was in a car wreck." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I spent the night in a hospital bed alone. I sent a message asking for help, not for money, not to pay your bills. Just help. A ride. A check-in." My throat tightened. "And 4 hours later, you posted a picture and captioned it, 'The family's complete.'" My sister blinked like she didn't even remember writing it. My brother rubbed his face. "We thought it was just one of your dramatic texts," he said. "You've always handled things. We just figured you would again. And that's the problem." Silence spread across the room like cold water. Then something I didn't expect. Dad lowered himself into a chair slowly, like his knees might give out. He looked smaller, not physically, emotionally. "We failed you," he said quietly. "All of us." Mom opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then shut it. Dad continued. "You shouldn't have been the one covering bills, fixing everything, holding the whole family together." Then he hesitated, searching my face. "But you have to understand something too. You taught us it was okay." I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "You never said no," he said softly. "You paid. You fixed. You smiled through it. You made it easy, not to change." I hated how much that hit. How some part of me recognized the truth in it. I hadn't just enabled them, I'd trained them. Not with words, with actions. With every bill I covered. Every crisis I absorbed. Every time I swallowed my exhaustion and said, "It's fine." My brother stood suddenly and pulled an envelope from his jacket. "We scraped together some money," he said, holding it out. "It's not much, but we want to help with your recovery." I took it, held it for a moment, then handed it back. "You'll need it more than I do." He didn't argue. And then Dad said something that genuinely stunned me. "We're selling the lake cabin." Mom's head whipped toward him like she hadn't approved this revelation. But he kept talking. "The taxes, the upkeep, it's all too much. We always expected you to cover the extras. It's not right." He swallowed, jaw tight. "We'll split the money evenly. 5 ways. 5 ways, me included." I searched his face, expecting manipulation. But it wasn't there. This wasn't their redemption arc. This was their bottom. The moment the scaffolding, me, was gone long enough for them to feel what standing actually required. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said quietly. Dad nodded. "We know." My sister's eyes filled with something. Not guilt, not sadness. Recognition, maybe. I turned toward the elevator. No hugs, no dramatic goodbye. Just my limp echoing down the hallway. For the first time, they knew I wasn't bluffing. For the first time, I knew it too. The days after the hospital meeting were quiet. Not the tense, waiting for the other shoe to drop, kind of quiet. A different kind. A kind I didn't recognize at first. A kind that felt like standing in the middle of a forest after a long storm. Debris everywhere, yes, but the air finally still. There were no more calls, no more Venmo requests, no guilt trips, no passive-aggressive posts, just silence. And in that silence, I healed. My leg slowly strengthened. The limp softened from a sharp reminder to a faint whisper. Physical therapy hurt, but in a way that felt like progress, not punishment. I cooked again. Real meals, not microwaved cans of soup. I diced onions for myself, just myself, and found something strangely empowering about that. Like reclaiming an ordinary piece of life I hadn't realized I'd surrendered. My fridge stayed full because I filled it. My bank account stopped circling the drain at the end of every month. It leveled out. Even climbed a little. The first time I bought something purely for me, a good pair of supportive sneakers, I almost cried in the store. Not because of the shoes, but because I didn't have to second guess whether someone else needed that money more. I wasn't bleeding financially anymore, and in that stillness, I began to see how starved I'd been for my own life. One afternoon, my uncle called. "They're actually selling the cabin?" he asked. "Looks like it," I said. He chuckled. That place always smelled like mildew and disappointment anyway. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. But beneath the humor, something real had shifted. Not just in them, in me. A few days later, he showed up with groceries, unannounced. Just a bag of basics. Coffee beans, oranges, crackers. "Returning the favor," he said with a shrug. He didn't stay long, didn't lecture, didn't probe, just asked, "You doing all right?" and left before I could answer. It was the easiest kindness I'd received in years. That same week, I got a text from Grandma. Lunch Sunday, just us. I went. We sat in her tiny kitchen with floral curtains and a table that wobbled if you leaned too hard. She made chicken salad and poured lemonade into old plastic cups that smelled faintly like cabinets. She didn't mention the accident, didn't mention the family. She just watched me eat, like she was making sure I wasn't skipping meals anymore. Then, quietly, she said, "You were the only one who showed up when my roof collapsed last year." I nodded, I remember. She reached across the table, her hands small and soft but firm. "You don't have to do that anymore," she said. "Not for people who don't show up back." The words sank deep, stayed with me for days. Just when I thought the dust had finally settled, something unexpected happened. My brother showed up at my door. No warning, no dramatic entrance, just knocked. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He stood there holding a six-pack of beer and looking like a man practicing humility for the first time. "I'm selling the truck," he said. "Trying to clear some debts. Figure out my own stuff." I waited. He scratched the back of his neck. "I've been a leech," he said bluntly. "We all have, but I'm trying." He wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He was just telling the truth. Then he handed me a folded paper, his GoFundMe page, the one he'd closed. Below the list of donations, he'd written, "I'm paying back everyone who helped, even the ones who didn't ask." He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for accountability, for himself. "Keep going," I said. He nodded once, left the beer at my feet, and walked away. 3 months after the accident, the limp was barely noticeable. I still felt stiffness on cold mornings, but compared to the old days, the emotional limping I'd done for years, this was nothing. I cooked, I slept better, I bought myself things without guilt. I felt like a person again. Not a safety net, not a wallet, not a placeholder for everyone else's emergencies. Then the email came. Subject, cabin closing documents. I thought it would fall apart, that something would go wrong, that they'd find a reason to keep me tethered. But it was real. The lake cabin, the monument of forced family traditions and unspoken expectations, was sold. And the money was split evenly, 5 ways. My share deposited cleanly, without strings. I stared at the number, not life-changing, but enough to do something for myself. Something small, something meaningful. So I booked a cabin in Oregon, by the coast, foggy mornings, tall pines, silence thick enough to actually think. No family, no obligations, no guilt, just me. I told Grandma. She smiled, handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo of me at 10 years old, covered in mud from her garden, grinning like I owned the world. "You've always been strong," she said, "but strong doesn't mean giving everything away." I hugged her. A real hug, the first in months. 2 days later, I boarded my flight. Just before takeoff, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hey, I know it's been a while. Can we talk?" No name, but something in my gut knew. My mother. I let the phone vibrate in my palm. The plane lifted off. Clouds rose like mountains beneath the window. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted revenge. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running toward their crises or running away from them. I was simply flying toward myself, toward peace, toward a life where silence wasn't abandonment, it was freedom. And I wasn't ready to let anyone take that from me yet. Maybe one day I'd answer, maybe not. But this time the choice was mine.